Welcome to the Trevor Roberts Talkfest podcast. Tonight we're going to be talking about The Third Door. We're going to go over step 3, part 2. Step 3 was so big I had to break it into two parts. It's like 13 chapters or something like that. We're going to cover 4 chapters today. This is kind of part of a series on The Third Door. Last week's episode was Step 3, Part 1. So if you didn't watch that, go back and check that out if you're interested. We got some awesome chapters in here in just a second. I'm going to do a recap of those. First, I just wanted to talk about a couple things that I have going on, some content that I'm going to be doing. I do want to say I had some new subscribers this last week on YouTube, and I am trying to get up to 50. And so, thank you to those of you, if you're listening, that subscribe. That really helps me, means a lot to me. I'm trying to get up to 50. Once you get up to 50, I'll be able to go onto YouTube and do YouTube Lives, which is really cool. The reason why I want to do that is because you can tell people, hey, in advance, April 29th, I'm going to do a YouTube live and it's going to be on this. And then you can tell people about it and you can hopefully kind of build an audience that is going to show up live to interact with you. And that's not something you can do until you have 50 subscribers. So, again, thank you very much. All right. So, let's jump into what I wanted to talk about. Okay, so I do just want to do like a quick overview of some of the content that I've got going on right now and then some of the things that are upcoming. So I'm going to finish The Third Door, and then we're going to move into this book called The Go Giver. I just read it. I'll probably read it again. It's like 100 pages. It doesn't take very long. Super easy to read, super fun to read, and it's all about giving. So it's a feel-good book. Makes you feel good. Learn a couple lessons, a little story about a powerful business idea. So it is a business book. It's definitely, it feels like sort of an investor. And because of his giving philosophy, he's introduced to a lot of new opportunities. He just finds himself in the right situations because he's always giving. And because he's always giving, people probably always introduce him to other people. And I don't know. I'll go into it in a little bit better detail. I need to get better at like selling the books before I review them. I think it's a 10 out of 10. Hopefully, I'll get better at doing that so that way people come and listen to it. But for today, we're going to talk about The Third Door. I also wanted to say that I'm going to do The Bachelorette. That's coming back in July. It's going to be on Jen's season. I'm excited for Jesse Palmer. I'm excited for Jen. First Asian American bachelorette ever. I don't know if there's ever been an Asian bachelor, so it might be the first of both, but definitely the first Asian American bachelorette, which is awesome. I also saw today that the Golden Bachelor got divorced, which is kind of wild. I saw something like it's one of the quickest ever. He got married in January and now it's April and he's getting divorced. So I don't know if it's official or if it's just coming soon, but it's like didn't even really make it 3 months and they're getting divorced. So that's crazy. And then I wanted to let everyone know I'm going to get back to having guests on the podcast very soon. So look forward to that. All right, so let's jump back into The Third Door by Alex Banayan. It's called The Wild Quest to Uncover How the World's Most Successful People Launch Their Careers. It's actually a pretty good sized book. Let's see. It's like 300 or 400 pages. Okay, it's about 300 pages. Alex Banayan started this quest when he was 19 years old. He's a student at USC. And the gist of it is that he's from a family that migrated here from India. They expect him to be a doctor. He's in med school. Doesn't really know if he wants to be a doctor. In fact, he thinks he probably doesn't want to be a doctor, but his parents talk about everything they sacrificed in order to get here in the United States and get him into school. I mean, it seems like he's in med school and he's going to be a doctor, but really, his parents were taking out like a second mortgage on the home and they're working two jobs. And getting him into college wasn't easy and paying for the tuition, right? So he has a lot of pressure to finish med school, but he doesn't really want to. And then he starts thinking about, well, how do people that are really successful, how do they know that's what they wanted to do? And how do they get their start? And then he gets this idea that maybe he'll interview them. So then he starts to write down lists of who he considers to be the top individual in every industry. And so for music, he picks Lady Gaga. And for film, he picks Steven Spielberg. And for technology, I think he picks Bill Gates with Microsoft, and the list goes on and on and on. Warren Buffett's on there, and so he's makes this list of all these people he wants to interview, and then he kind of goes through this process of figuring out how he's going to do that. And one of the first things he does is he needs to get money to go to a show that's in San Francisco, and he's in LA. And so he somehow decides the best way to get money is to hack the prices right. And he goes and gets in line to be an audience member, figures out like how to really increase his chances of being selected as a contestant, and of course it works. He does become a contestant. Then he ends up winning the show, gets all this money, sells his prizes like his boat, his vacation package and all that. Gets all this money, and then he goes on the mission. And he is able to interview like I don't know if he interviews every single person, but a lot of really famous people, and it's a wild journey along the way. And it's just so fascinating to me because he didn't have a single connection. He didn't have anywhere to get started. And the whole purpose of the book is to help people that are like him, that don't have anything to get started on, that are just like kind of building from scratch. The reason it's called the third door is I'm going to go ahead and read. I'll just read it, but basically he's like saying there's three doors and you want to go in the third door unless you're part of the 1% that already just have access. Let's see if I can find it. Ditch the line. Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to read this and then I'll jump into where we left off from last week. So life, business, success, it's just like a nightclub. There are always three ways in. There's the first door, the main entrance, where the line curves around the block, where 99% of people wait around hoping to get in. There's the second door, the VIP entrance, where the billionaires, celebrities, and the people born into it slip through. But no one ever tells you there is always the third door. It's the entrance where you have to jump out of line, run down the alley, bang on the door 100 times, crack open the window, sneak through the kitchen. There's always a way. Whether it's how Bill Gates sold his first piece of software or Spielberg became the youngest studio director in Hollywood history, they all took the third door. All right, and it's just pretty well written. It's full of awesome stories. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of what we've covered so far. So step 1 is called Ditch the Line. There's 3 chapters: Staring at the Ceiling, The Price is Right, and The Storage Closet. So staring at the ceiling is he's just kind of brainstorming, figuring out some of the stuff. The Price is Right is about the story I told you about. The storage closet is where he kind of works. That's where he's like working on his mission. It's like this little storage closet in his dorm. Step 2 is called Run Down the Alley. And that's like, okay, so this is all sort of like getting out of line 1 and trying to find the third door, right? So there's 4 chapters here. The Spielberg game. So we learn all about Steven Spielberg and how he became the youngest studio director here. It's an awesome chapter. And then Crouching in the Bathroom. This is all about when he goes to visit Tim Ferriss and he ends up crouching in a bathroom trying to find him. But then we learn a lot of important lessons from that chapter, main one being borrowed credibility. So whenever you can borrow credibility from an organization that you belong to or somebody that you're with, right? Then chapter 6 is Chi Time, which is all about this individual who has a really cool story, how they were able to maximize their time and really jump ahead, probably skip a couple steps in life from where they started. Then there's the hidden reservoir. It's about we learn the message from Sugar Ray Lewis and how he had that hidden reservoir when he would be in the fighting, like the 12th round. You've got no energy left. You've been punched in the face, but yet somehow you've got to find that hidden reservoir to keep going. All right, so step 3 we covered last time, and we did 6 chapters. It's a big one. This is step 3, part 1. The dream mentor, so it's about finding that mentor. Chapter 9 is the rules, so his mentor gives him some rules. Chapter 10, adventures only happen to the adventurous. I love that one. It's basically about being open to adventures, saying yes to opportunities when they come. Bite off more than you can chew. Love that. You're just like, yep, just I'll do it. You just do it. Like, just say stuff, just volunteer, sign yourself up for stuff that you're not ready to do. And then chapter 12, that's how you do business, which is essentially just be yourself. Chapter 13 is exponential life. So take calculated risks and invest in yourself. All right. Today we're going to be covering we're going to do step 3, part 2, 4 chapters. Chapter 14 is the avoidance list. Chapter 15 is you can't out Amazon. Chapter 16 is no one ever asks. And chapter 17, it's all gray. All right, so as we go through these chapters, I do like to usually have an action or some type of message or action that we're getting from each chapter. So chapter 14, the avoidance list, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but he kind of does something that he pays off later. And once you know that he's going to do that, I've read the book a couple times. If you know that he's going to do that, I don't know. I can't spoil it, but I don't like when you read it the first time, it's great. But then when you go back through it and you know what's going to happen, it makes you not really appreciate it. And you're just like, well, it just makes you think, okay, do I really need this information? Because the message you get later is that people will lie to you, essentially. And he is told something. I feel like I'm spoiling it, but he gets told something that he thinks of as like a really important tip. And the whole book's full of tips. I mean, it's like stories and then basically like helpful tips for anybody that's in his shoes or in your own journey. If you're starting a business or you're going to school or you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life or whatever, you're trying to rise up a corporate ladder, you're trying to become an author, whatever you're trying to do, he's giving you tips. And the tip that you learn in this chapter, you eventually find out later, was it just a lie? And so is there something helpful? Yes, but still I'm tainted by it. So the message I'm taking from this chapter is just get organized. And essentially we're going to break down the chapter and we'll go through some of the stories, but the main message is that we're not going to focus on because I just am tainted by it, is what's called the avoidance list, and that's the name of the chapter. And he gets some advice that how do you accomplish if you have a million wants in the world? And this guy says, write down the 25 things that you want to accomplish this year in the next 12 months. Excuse me. And then he says, okay. So then he writes, 25 things down. And then when he's done with that, and I think he's at a party, right? There's all kinds of people around. So he probably didn't just do it instantly. He probably like spent an hour working on this, makes this list. Then he goes back to the guy and says, okay, now what? And the guy says, okay, circle. You can only do 5 items in the next 3 months, which really frustrates me too. This is one of the only chapters that I complain about in the whole book. But he says 5 items in the next 3 months. Well, if you play that out, that's only 20 items. So you wouldn't have gotten to all 25 in the year. You would have only gotten to 20. So I don't like this, I don't like that. But anyway, he says if you could only do 5 of them in the next 3 months, which 5 would they be, and circle those. So then he circles those. So then he makes a second list and he writes down the 5. And he says that's the priority list. So those are the 5 things you're going to work on. Everything else he calls the avoidance list, and he basically says don't work on any of these things at all. Don't even think about them, because they're going to distract you from your priority list. And basically the message is if you have 25 different projects going on, you're never going to really progress on any of the projects. And that makes sense. And there is some truth to that. But what's tainted about it is the guy says that he learned that message from Warren Buffett. And Alex actually interviews Warren Buffett, sort of, later. And Warren Buffett says that he never said that and that it was a lie. And then I think Alex reveals later that Dan made it up, or this guy made it up. And so it's just frustrating. Anyway, I do think you can learn something by this. And so the message I'm getting is just be organized. Now, I did buy a calendar that you can put up on your wall, probably a month ago. I got it a little late. Wish I would have pulled the trigger back in January, but I didn't. But it's huge. It's massive, and it's the whole year. And so you can visualize the whole year at once. It's great. You can see your months, you can see your weeks. I really like it. So that helps me visualize the year. And then you can write down, I could probably talk about that forever, but you can think about if you have one big thing you're going to accomplish in the year, you can plan when you're going to work on that. Because if you don't plan when you're going to work on something, then it's not going to happen. And then you can plan, what do I want to do? What is my theme for this month? What is my theme for this quarter? And you can write that all out. So I think just getting organized. What time do you go to bed? What time do you get up? You don't have to have this crazy morning routine, but we all become a system of our habits. Our habits are going to define us to some degree. And so you want to have good habits. And so having a semi morning routine that you sort of follow most of the time is pretty healthy. And so for me, it's waking up, having water right away, and eating breakfast, working out. Sometimes I work out, sometimes I eat breakfast. It just depends on which one I'm going to do first. But water, breakfast, working out, family time, then coffee. So I do have coffee. Maybe someday I'll cut it out. Part of me really wants to cut it out because I don't think it's good for you, but I love it, and I don't really drink anything besides water and coffee and tea. And I feel like if I lose coffee, it's just only tea. And tea is good, but I don't know. I got to up my tea game before I get rid of coffee. But I don't have coffee until I've been awake for an hour. I think if I can make it 2 hours, that's even better. But I don't just rush to the coffee. And I think that's important. So the first thing is wake up, water, and then shower, or not shower, and then work out, breakfast, family time, shower, work. It's a great morning routine. Nothing crazy extra about it, and I get going on the day. Okay, so enough about that. The message over here is be organized, but I want to talk about some of the stories here. So, Alex is now at the end of the last chapter. I didn't really talk about this too much last time. I'm just going to quickly take a look. It was exponential life. So, in that chapter, Elliot invites Alex to kind of come to Europe, and he learns about taking some risks. And Elliot, at the end of it, he says, hey, you could drop out of school, stop working on your mission to write this book, and you can come work for me. I'll be able to give you an exponential life. And the message there was a lot of people that live a linear life, they wake up, they're born, they go to school, they graduate, they go to college, they get an internship, they get a job, they get a couple promotions, they take some family vacations, they retire, and it's a very linear life. And the exponential life is about skipping steps, meeting people, making connections, and that sort of thing. And he says, I'm going to help you skip all these steps. Like, I already have met all these famous people. I'm running a very successful business, and he runs a conference called Summit. And at the conference, he invites like 750 of the top business owners in the United States. So it is kind of a crazy opportunity that he's offering him, right? But Alex is all about wanting to write his book. And so he has to think about it. And in this one, in this chapter, Elliot has him come to his home. So that's the setting. So we get to Elliot's house, and remember, Elliot is like this 30-year-old guy. He's not that old, and he also came from nothing was handed to him. We learned in step 1 about Elliot Bisnaugh, who was Alex's dream mentor, and how he kind of rose through the ranks to become the person that he is today. And the person that he is like a guy that set up a party for the White House, a guy who's buying part of a mountain in Utah to host a conference. He travels all over the world, just totally randomly. He works from his laptop. He knows all these entrepreneurs, and he's a young guy. Okay, so Alex gets to his house in Utah. Elliot, and it's like this giant mansion in the mountains. And Elliot says, "Hey, this is my home," and him and a dozen employees live there. There's lots of descriptions about all the food and all the private chefs, and Alex goes and sits down by a guy who's eating alone. Turns out to be the lead singer of Incubus, which I think this book was written maybe in 2019, but Incubus was pretty big maybe in the early 2000s. That would have been awesome. Then a former host of TRL sits down. Then one of Barack Obama's economic advisors sits down, and the list just goes on and on. There's NFL players, there's Nike executives, there's authors, there's like CEOs of companies like Zappos shoe company. There's just tons and tons of people that are there because he had him come out during like a little mini event that he was doing, but still it was like, I mean, it's just like not that weird because he's friends with all these people. Tim Ferriss was there. And so that day, Alex meets all these people, and they all have little missions of their own. And Alex, they're telling each other about their missions. And part of the whole thing that Elliot does is he has them all just like eat food and hang out and network. Then he sets up a day of like, there's yoga, and you can go to meditation, and there's a volleyball game, and there's like all these different activities that you can do. And you're doing all these activities with all these other wealthy entrepreneurs, famous sort of mini celebrities. Um, Elliot eventually gives a big speech, and in the speech he tells everyone about Alex. He's like new friend, new to the team. Tells them about The Price is Right. All of a sudden, everybody's pumped to meet Alex. So people are coming up to him like, "Oh, you're so lucky that you're like so close with Elliot, and we're so excited to have you here." And it's just like Alex is really feeling the pressure to say yes to working for him, but also it's like he's just realizing how incredible this opportunity is too. Um, then then Alex meets two people, a girl named, it's either Mikey or Mickey, and a guy named Ben. They've both written books, and they both tell Alex that um, they can introduce him to their agents, which Alex is pumped about because we'd also kind of been learning that Alex, he hears that in order to get his interview with Bill Gates, he needs to get an agent, and he needs to get a publishing deal. And he's not going to get a publishing deal until he gets an agent. So he made a list of agents, and he's trying to call them, but he's not getting a lot of answers, and some answers he is getting, they're all rejection letters. So he needs to find an agent. And now he's going to have authors that have agents reaching out to their agents, trying to introduce him to Alex. And this all comes from this meeting. All right, so the last part of the chapter is the avoidance list, priority list I was talking about. And then Alex tells Elliot not to keep working on the mission. Or I'm sorry, Alex tells Elliot that he's not going to take the job. And Elliot says he's cool with it, but Alex was really worried about that. Um that has happened to me a couple times in life where it actually just happened. This guy that I know really wants me to go to this event, and I have something going on. So actually, I can just say my grandma's gonna be coming into town. She's gonna be here tomorrow, and I could still go to the event, but my grandma's gonna be here, and we moved from Nebraska to Washington. I don't get to see her that often. In fact, I might not get to see her for another year. I mean, it could be longer than that. I don't know how long it's gonna be, and my daughters don't get to see her that often, and so I have I have a lot going on with work, with being a dad, with family, trying to do this podcast, just like we all do. But being organized and trying to plan, you can't do it all, right? And so there has to be a balance. And this guy who is sort of like a mentor to me is just really trying to pound into my head that I have to go. And I was like thinking about it, and I already know I'm not going to go because I want to spend that time with my grandma, and it's important to me. And it's not like I feel guilty about that or wasteful at all. It's work life balance, and you have to have your priorities straight and know what is the most important thing. And the most important thing is always family. That's why we do everything we do. Family, like, we work so we can provide for our family, or so we can be part of a family. Everything is for like, that's why we're here. That's why I'm like doing anything that I'm doing is to be a dad and to be a husband and to be a member of a larger family. So yes, and then there's friends, right, like on the outside of family, that are just as important. And then there's things like hobbies and work and the rest of life. But work is always going to be second for me. And I know that, like, in order to be LeBron James, he didn't put family first. Now, family's important to him. He's married to the same person, he has kids. He is a great husband, I'm told, or I read about. I love LeBron. I watch a lot of his interviews. I followed him closely. I know he's a great family guy, and he probably would say that family comes first. But I do think he's like he's missed a ton of stuff because of he puts basketball first. He puts his career first. If is he going to go to his own game? Is he going to go to practice, or is he going to fly across the country and go to his son's basketball game? I think he takes every opportunity he can to make it work and try to do what he can to be part of his family, but he's putting his career first, and he's going to be the greatest of all time, and so that's why he's doing it. Some people they have that passion, and like even Shannon Sharp, he talks about the sacrifice that he made in order to be in the NFL. He has the 3 Super Bowl rings. Then he goes on to become a very successful broadcaster and television personality. And he's always sort of put his career first. And he's talked about how he hasn't had the marriages and whatever. He's missed out on family time. And so for me, I don't know if I could ever do that. In fact, I know I couldn't do that. Like, I am always a family first type of guy. So, do I want, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't mean you're not gonna have success. But family is always coming first for me. I don't know how I got on this now. I'm like kind of lost. Let me think. Oh, yeah. I remember. So anyway, this guy is just telling me I have to go to this event, and I know I'm not going to go. So I'm going to have to tell him that I'm not going to go. And it's a lot like Alex had to tell Elliot that, hey, I'm not going to work for you. I'm going to keep working on my book. Alex was really worried Elliot was gonna like kick him out, and he didn't. He was like, "Hey, man, that's cool. You do you. You've always got a place with me." And I don't know what's gonna happen with this guy. I'm sure it'll be fine. But that has happened with friends before, where it's like they're really trying to sell you on something, and then you're like, no, and you end up just telling them like, "Hey, thanks, but no thanks." And there are times where they don't take it so well, but it's always a sign of a true friend when they are just totally cool with it. Okay. So the next chapter, chapter 15, is you can't out Amazon. Let's see, what is the action I wrote down for this guy? So I wrote down just be yourself. I might have to rethink that a little bit because I realized during my recap that I already had a be yourself chapter, but I mean, you can't out Amazon. Amazon is basically saying don't try to be someone else. Like, don't try to be Amazon, right? So the chapter starts off. Alex gets back home and he's looking at his list of 20 agents. There's only one left and his top agent. So when he made his list of 20, he knew which one was his number one choice. And he didn't reach out to that person, and he reached out to the other 19 first. And at this point, they've all told him no. So now he's only down to his number one. But he's back at Elliot's house. This girl, Mikey and Ben, had offered, or sorry, he's still at home, but back at Elliot's, Mikey and Ben were like, "Hey, we'll introduce you to our agents." So he calls them up and he's like, "Hey, can I take you up on those offers?" They both say yeah. Um, Ben calls his agent and sets up a meeting, and Mikey says, "Fly to New York. I'll go and introduce you in person together." So Alex actually flies to New York. He's got some money at this point, and he's got like pot committed where he's really trying to make this work, right? So he goes out to New York. He meets Mikey out there, and she delivers, and she takes him straight into her agent's office, and the agent's like on the phone in a meeting, and she cuts in and she says, "Drop what you're doing. You've got to meet my friend Alex." And then Alex proceeds to talk about all these stats and this marketing and why he believes his book will be successful. The reason he does that is because he does a lot of research and figures out that that's kind of what you do. But that's not necessarily how he's been found success in the past. Um, the way he's sort of like how he met Elliot Bisnaugh was he cold emailed him this really emotional email, and it stuck out to Alex, right? So doing the facts, if he would have emailed Elliot all those boring facts, Elliot probably would have just ignored it. But the email was very like spoke with his heartstrings. Um, he also goes and meets Ben's agent and delivers the same pitch. Um, Alex leaves both of the meetings. Basically, the message he got when he met both of the agents is, "Hey, Alex, you're great and your book sounds great, but I need you to send me up like an official proposal. I'll read it, I'll review it, we'll make a decision, I'll get back to you." Now, um, he eventually learns that none of these people are going to be his agent. They get back to him and they say, "No." They say, "We don't think that you're a fit." And so he's pretty down. He's pretty sad. So he calls his friend, and his friend is like, "Hey, this reminds me of this Amazon story." And so he tells a story about how basically, sorry, he tells a story about how Walmart had all these executives in a room, and they're figuring out that Amazon is like blowing up and taking a huge portion of their market share, and they are like really struggling, and they need to find a way to compete with Amazon. So they start researching like what Amazon is doing and how they're able to cut costs and how they're getting like directly from the wholesalers and their online approach and like delivering stuff, and they're like everything Amazon does about their business model, and Walmart starts incorporating it. They start trying to do the same thing online and blah blah blah. Like they're basically just trying to straight up copy Amazon. But I guess 6 months goes by, doesn't work out very well. Their numbers aren't going good. People aren't buying from them in the same way for whatever reason. Like, the story doesn't really go into it. I have theories about it. I mean, it probably has a lot to do with like, I thought of Walmart a certain way my whole life. I remember growing up in a small town, Walmart was always on the outskirts of town. And if you've ever read about anything about Walmart, they very strategically always put their Walmarts on the outside of town. And I can't remember exactly why, but there was a big reason for it. And what they would do is they would like go to a certain size town. They'd go to the outskirts of the town. They wanted it to be kind of by the interstate. And then they would buy a huge portion of land. That way they could like build a giant store, and then they'd have a huge parking lot, and they would know that if they could get it like on the outside of land, I think it was like outskirts of town by an interstate, eventually like things would be built out by them, and the town would grow and start to kind of consume it, and then it would be like a busy part of town that people regularly go to. In the beginning, it would just be an outskirt thing. But I always used to go, and I love going, but it was like a thing you did in person. You went and drove there, you parked, you walked in, I got to know the layout of it, got your shopping cart, you looked at everything, and then you like left. And one thing that it was always nice is they had a pretty good return policy. You could feel pretty confident that they were going to take back whatever. So that was always nice. But Amazon sort of started off online, and it was a very different feel to it. And I don't go to Amazon stores in person, right? I don't even know if they have those. And I don't buy a lot of things from Walmart online. I buy plenty of things online, but not a lot of things online from Walmart. And I do think you can buy things online from Walmart today, and some people probably do. But for the most part, if I'm going to buy something from Walmart, I go there in person. Anyway, so the point of the message was that Walmart eventually hired a new executive who came in and saw what was going on, and she was like hung up this banner that said, "You can't out Amazon," and they stopped trying to copy Amazon and just started to go back to thinking about like what Walmart does that makes Walmart successful. And their numbers started getting better and all that. So, um Alex decides he's going to write this last agent on an email, a cold email. That's sort of what he does. And he does it at 3 a.m. And I remember I said back when I covered step one that it's an amazing story, this Alex Bisnoff story. But one thing that I just don't know if a lot of people can duplicate, and maybe I'm totally wrong about this, but he just cold emails extremely successful people. He doesn't know them. He doesn't have a lead. He just types out an email, and then it works. And so I just have a hard time taking that leap of faith. But anyway, I mean, he gets plenty of rejection throughout the book. Not everything works. But he does have a lot of success with cold emails. Anyway, she ends up writing back in the morning saying to call. He calls, and she offers to be his agent on the spot. So now he has an agent. All right, next chapter. No one ever asks. This is a really fun chapter. Let's see what the action I wrote down was. Oh, I wrote down always ask. Okay, so he wakes up. Now, remember, he was in New York. He's visiting Mikey. Now, if you think about it, he goes to New York and he does all this stuff. He spends all this money on his flight to New York. He goes and meets these agents in person. Doesn't get them. They all say no. Seems like a giant waste. Now he's going to go back home to LA. And he's getting ready to get on his flight and head back, get in the car or whatever. Mikey says, "You can't leave. You've got to come to Agrapalooza." And she's like, "Made this up. It's a costume party that she made up. She hosts it, but it's at her friend's house, and it's in New Jersey." And Alex is like, "I can't go. I've got stuff to do the next morning. Um, like my flight's in a couple hours. I need to go." And she's like, "No, you're staying." So anyway, seems to have like a power over him. She's got a really big personality, and remember, a couple chapters earlier is called "Adventures Only Happen to the Adventurous." And so, I mean, it's not like he has a family. He doesn't have like he's in school. I don't know if he was in school if this is summer right now, but he just decides he's not going back and he stays an extra day. And he goes to the party. He wakes up the next morning, and this girl Mikey is talking to the CEO of Zappos, a guy named Tony Hisa. I'm not sure how you pronounce that last name, but I didn't get the vibe. Like I didn't know if he just showed up the next morning or if he was at the party the night before and like Alex just didn't know about it. But anyway, um, Alex ends up talking to him. I guess he's coming around with a clipboard and he's asking people that day what their dream was. And Alex says his dream is to be the CEO of Zappos for a day. And through that, he ends up shadowing him 2 weeks later. So 2 weeks later, Alex ends up going to the Zappos headquarters and he's shadowing the CEO. And he follows him around for 2 weeks. And he's going from conference room to conference room, meetings. He's listening in. Tony's like asking him, "What did you think?" He gets a Zappos T-shirt. He's getting all these really cool experiences. Now, Alex says he does notice that some employees are like kind of jealous of him, and eventually Alex goes up to Tony and is like, "Why don't you let your employees shadow you?" And Tony says that no one ever asks. And so it's just like it's so true though that people that like they just don't do that sort of thing. They just don't like the worst they can say is no, right? It's a very I've noticed this that there's not a lot of people that I've met that um like if you suggest that they go and ask, if they're the type of person that would never ever ever ask something that's a little bit uncomfortable like that, then they won't do it. And most people are I think are like that. And so they never think to do it and they're not around people that are going to encourage them to do it. And then if they were encouraged to do something like that, they just wouldn't ask anyway. And so you do have to be somebody that is willing to be a little bit more bold and just go out there and ask and realize the worst somebody can say is no. And it doesn't have to be weird. Just say, "Okay, no problem." And you move on. But like, I wanted to ask, nobody cares about that. Um, I always, I always ask. This is an easy one for me. I have no problem being asking, getting told no. And sometimes when you ask and you're told no, you feel good about it. You're like, well, at least I asked, I tried, and if it gives you an opportunity to handle that no with grace and just be like, cool. And you can still retain the friendship and they'll respect you for that. But the big like reminder here for me is just always ask. All right, so now we're on chapter 17. It's all gray. This is the last chapter we're going to talk about today. Alex is back at home now, and he's realizing that he has a lot of work in front of him with his book deal. And so he's still in college. He calls Elliot for advice, thinking he's going to drop out of college. Now, if you remember, it was back during the video where I talked about step one. Um, he changed his major from pre med to business, and when he did that, it was such a big deal that he told his family and they all freaked out about it. They really, like his mom cried. And he's from, I think he's Indian. And it was just like their culture, they're very invested in his education. And remember, like, his dad has working multiple jobs. They took out a second mortgage on the home to get him into school. And so they had these dreams that he was going to become a doctor. So him changing his major from pre-med to business was an epically big deal, and his grandma had to actually come and talk to him and like she made him do this promise that's called a Juno Ma, and it's a certain type of promise. I think that means if you don't keep it, you die, something crazy like that. But he makes this promise to his grandma that he's not going to drop out of college, that he's still going to finish, because they're all worried that him changing his major is just like the first step in him eventually dropping out. And now he's thinking about dropping out. And so the reason is because he's got this agent and now he's working on his book proposal. And he sent one in, but she's like, you got to totally rewrite it. Here's how you do it. It's got to be this length. And it was like a huge project. And he's starting to realize that he doesn't have enough time to meet the deadline she's giving him about the book stuff and also do his college work. So he kind of thinks he needs to drop out, and he calls Elliot, and he's kind of hoping that Elliot's going to say, yeah, just drop out. He like wants that reinforcement that it's okay. He wants somebody really successful to be like, yeah, go, it's okay. Go ahead and drop out. And then he can feel like he didn't just make a rash decision on his own, but he really is looking for that reinforcement. And Elliot says, don't drop out. So that's not what he wants to hear. And Elliot says, Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates did not drop out the way you think they did. So you need to do some research. And so then we get a couple pages in the book about Alex doing this research. And we find out that Mark Zuckerberg was a junior and Facebook is really getting launched. And so he takes one semester off and he continues to work on Facebook, and it ends up turning into this huge thing. And then he does drop out, but he didn't just drop out. He was only going to take one semester off and just see how his business went. And if it didn't take off the way it did, he would have gone back. Bill Gates was the same way. Bill Gates actually took off a semester, worked on Microsoft, went back to college, did another semester of college, and then took the next semester off again, and then stayed out. And it just all had to do with they were taking a calculated risk. It wasn't necessarily if they were going to take the risk or not, it was when to take it. It was how much risk are you going to take. So they didn't just quit college. They gave themselves some time to work on the things that they want. And a good lesson there could be, if you want to start your own business, you don't necessarily have to quit your job. Maybe you can take a leave of absence. Maybe you can build up a savings to live for 6 months, and you can say to yourself, I'm taking the next 6 months to work on this business every single day. I've got enough money saved up. I'm going to go for it. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to get my job back or whatever, I definitely think that all that's possible. But then Alex references this quote from a Kanye song. And the quote is, told him I finished school and I started my own business. They say, oh, you graduated? And then I say, no, I decided I was finished. And then so it's just really funny to me that Alex is like quoting Kanye in there. And I actually saw this Instagram. I love it where Kanye wins the award. I think it might be like the Academy Award. And he's like, y'all want to know what I would say if I didn't win? I guess we'll never know. And then he doesn't laugh at all. He's like straight face, just like backs away. I love Kanye. So Alex is now back at home and he's about to submit the command to take the semester off. He calls his parents or whatever, tells them about it. They're crying. They're all freaking out. He's 3 hours away from hitting the button. I mean, the deadline is 3 hours away. Like if he doesn't hit it in 3 hours time, then it's too late to take the semester off. He's not going to get his money back, essentially. And right when he goes to do it, his grandma shows up. And that's the end of the chapter. And you have to wait till next time to find out what he does. So, again, lots of great lessons and tips in this book. It's been a really exciting story. What I love about it is you get all the lessons and the tips, and you get the real life examples and stories. Um, but the fun part is the stories, like you're learning about Alex. And it really does make me just want to focus on storytelling. So I think what I'm going to do is try to start building a story bank. I have so many fun stories throughout my life, but I never write them down. And a communication enthusiast or coach that I follow is really suggesting that people create a story bank. So I think I'm going to start to develop that, my own personal story bank, and then I'm going to practice telling them. So I might start incorporating that into some of my videos as well. I think that that's all I have for this time. I want to say thank you again, especially if you have subscribed. If you've made it this far and you can subscribe if you haven't already, that would be amazing. I thank you so much and have a great night.